The phone rang in the middle of the night, shattering Daniel's excitement as the director's voice cut through the line like a blade. "We're going in a different direction, kid. The roles cut effective immediately." Daniel sat frozen on the edge of his Los Angeles apartment couch, the script pages he had memorized for weeks now scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. He had poured everything into landing the lead in that prestige drama, the one that was supposed to launch him from struggling auditions to red carpets, and now it was gone. The reason hung unspoken in the air, but Daniel knew deep down it had nothing to do with talent and everything to do with the photo that had leaked earlier that week showing him laughing too closely with Lorenzo at a quiet beach bonfire. He stared at the blank screen after the call ended, his chest tightening with a mix of rage and fear that had been building for years. At 28, Daniel Reynolds had always played the part perfectly, the charming straight actor from a small Midwest town who smiled for the cameras and dodged personal questions with practiced ease. His parents back in Ohio still sent him care packages filled with church bulletins and hopeful questions about settling down with a nice girl. They had no idea their only son had fallen in love with his college roommate Lorenzo Hayes 3 years ago during a late-night study session that turned into something neither of them expected. Lorenzo was out and proud, a rising screenwriter who wore his identity like armor, while Daniel kept his locked away, terrified that one crack would end everything he had sacrificed for. The next morning, Daniel paced his tiny kitchen, replaying the director's cold tone. He grabbed his phone and dialed Lorenzo, the only person who might understand. "They cut me low, they actually cut me," he said, his voice cracking on the last word. Lorenzo's calm reply came through the speaker. "Come over right now, I'm making coffee, and we're figuring this out together." Daniel drove across town, the palm trees blurring past as tears stung his eyes. When he arrived, Lorenzo pulled him into a tight hug, the kind that said more than words ever could. They sat on the worn leather couch in Lorenzo's bright apartment, the morning sun streaming through the windows. "It was Mike, wasn't it?" Daniel muttered, referring to his so-called best friend and fellow actor who had been at the bonfire. Lorenzo nodded slowly. He swore he wouldn't say anything, but rumors spread fast in this town. "I'm sorry, Daniel, I should have been more careful." That afternoon, Daniel's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his mother. "Heard about the role, honey. Your father and I are praying for you. Any chance it's because you need to focus on finding a good woman to support you." The words hit like a punch. Daniel deleted the text without replying, his hands shaking. Lorenzo noticed and squeezed his shoulder. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Daniel pulled away, standing abruptly. "You don't get it, Lo. This is my life, my career. My family would never understand." The words hung heavy between them, creating the first real crack in their relationship. Lorenzo's eyes softened with hurt, but he didn't push. Instead, he made dinner, their usual routine of pasta and quiet conversation, but the air felt different, charged with the weight of what had just been lost. As evening fell, Daniel stood on Lorenzo's balcony, overlooking the city lights, wondering how one leaked moment could unravel years of careful planning. He thought back to their first kiss in the dorm room, the way Lorenzo had looked at him with such certainty, while Daniel's heart raced with terror and joy all at once. Now that joy felt tainted by the fear of losing everything. His agent had already called, confirming the studio was distancing itself, citing creative differences, but everyone in the industry knew what that meant. Daniel was being blacklisted before he even got started. Lorenzo joined him outside, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Whatever happens next, we face it together, okay?" Daniel nodded, but inside he wondered if together was even possible anymore. The night stretched on, filled with restless thoughts and the growing realization that his secret was no longer safe. By midnight, Daniel had made a decision. He would fight for another role, any role, to prove them wrong. But deep down, he knew the real battle was just beginning, the one inside himself, where love and ambition collided with no easy winner. Lorenzo watched him from the doorway, concern etched on his face, knowing that this cut role was only the start of a much longer journey. The two men sat in silence as the city hummed below them, unaware of how one phone call had changed the course of their lives forever. Daniel's mind raced with memories of late-night rehearsals and stolen weekends in Big Sur, where they could be themselves without fear. Now those memories felt like fragile glass, ready to shatter at the slightest pressure from the outside world. The following day brought more bad news. Daniel's publicist advised him to lay low, issue a vague statement about focusing on new projects. No one wanted to touch the controversy, even if it was just a blurry photo. He spent the afternoon scrolling through casting sites, feeling the walls close in. Lorenzo tried to distract him with a walk along the Venice boardwalk, but every laughing couple reminded Daniel of what he couldn't have openly. "I hate that I put you through this," he whispered as they sat on a bench watching the ocean. Lorenzo turned to him, his dark eyes steady. "You didn't put me through anything. I chose you, Daniel, every single day." The words warmed him, but the fear lingered like a shadow refusing to fade. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel felt the first stirrings of resolve mixed with the ache of uncertainty. This was his life, now a gay man in Hollywood, fighting not just for roles, but for the right to exist without apology. And somewhere in the distance, the path ahead looked both terrifying and inevitable. Weeks blurred into a haze of rejected auditions and sleepless nights. Daniel threw himself into gym sessions and script readings, anything to avoid the growing silence from his agent. Lorenzo stayed by his side, bringing takeout after long days at the Writers Guild and listening without judgment when Daniel vented about the industry that had turned its back. But the distance between them widened subtly. Daniel started canceling their weekend getaways, claiming he needed to focus on networking events where he could rebuild his reputation. In truth, he was terrified that being seen with Lorenzo again would seal his fate. One evening, after a particularly brutal callback rejection, Daniel snapped at Lorenzo over the phone. "Maybe we should take a break until things cool down." The line went quiet before Lorenzo replied softly, "If that's what you need, but don't push me away forever." That night, Daniel drove aimlessly through the Hollywood Hills, replaying every choice that led him here. He remembered the day he met Mike at acting class, the instant friendship that felt like a lifeline in a cutthroat city. Mike had been the one to introduce him to the director, the one who promised to keep his secret. Now that same friend had betrayed him, leaking the photo to a tabloid contact for a quick favor. Daniel confronted him the next morning at a coffee shop near the studios. "How could you, Mike? After everything?" Mike shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his eyes. It slipped out at a party, "Man, I didn't think it would blow up like this. You know how these things go." The apology felt hollow, and Daniel walked away feeling the sting of lost trust sharper than any role rejection. Back at his apartment, he called his parents, trying to sound upbeat. His father launched into the usual lecture. "Son, life isn't handed to you. Maybe this is God's way of telling you to straighten up and settle down." Daniel gripped the phone tighter, biting back the truth that threatened to spill out. His mother chimed in with concern. "We just want you happy, honey. There's a nice girl from church whose brother lives out there." The conversation ended with promises Daniel knew he couldn't keep, leaving him drained and isolated. Lorenzo texted later, "I'm here if you want to talk, no pressure." Daniel stared at the message for hours before replying with a simple thanks that felt like a betrayal of its own. The psychological weight pressed down harder each day. Daniel started questioning everything: his career, his identity, even his love for Lorenzo. Was it fair to drag someone so open and confident into his closet? He threw himself into a small indie project, a minor supporting role that paid barely enough for rent. On set, he overheard whispers about his situation and forced himself to laugh it off with the crew. Nights were the worst when memories of Lorenzo's touch and laughter flooded back, leaving him restless and aching. One rainy afternoon, Lorenzo showed up unannounced with groceries and a determined look. "You're not doing this alone, Daniel. I know you're scared, but running from us won't fix anything." They cooked together, the familiar rhythm easing some of the tension. As they ate, Lorenzo shared stories from his own coming out experience, the initial family rejection that eventually turned to reluctant acceptance. "It took time, but it was worth it," he said quietly. Daniel listened, feeling a spark of hope flicker for the first time in weeks. Yet the conflict escalated when Daniel's sister called from Ohio, revealing that their parents had seen the leaked photo online. "Dad is furious. Dan, he thinks you're throwing your life away. Mom's crying every night." The news hit like a freight train. Daniel paced the room, arguing with his sister over the phone, while Lorenzo sat nearby, offering silent support. After hanging up, he collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I can't do this, Lo. They're never going to accept me." Lorenzo knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "Then maybe it's time you accept yourself first." The words lingered long after Lorenzo left, giving Daniel space to think. That night, he stared at old photos of the two of them hidden in his phone, the smiles genuine and free. The misunderstanding with Mike, the family pressure, and his own fears had created a perfect storm, one that was slowly eroding his sense of self. By the end of the month, Daniel had landed another audition, a low-budget short film that might lead to bigger things. He prepared obsessively, but the anxiety gnawed at him. Lorenzo sent encouraging texts, and they met for a brief lunch where the conversation stayed light, avoiding the heavy topics. Still, Daniel could feel the strain the way Lorenzo's eyes searched his for reassurance. The betrayal from Mike had fractured their circle of friends, leaving Daniel wary of trusting anyone new. He started journaling late at night, pouring out the confusion, the love, the anger in pages he would never show anyone. The psychological toll showed in his weight loss and the dark circles under his eyes, but he pushed forward, determined not to let the cut role define him. Little did he know this period of isolation was forging the strength he would need for the bigger battles ahead. As summer turned to fall, Daniel felt the first hints of change stirring within him, a quiet determination to stop hiding, even if it meant facing consequences he had long feared. Lorenzo waited patiently, his loyalty unwavering, a beacon in the storm Daniel had created for himself. The city lights continued to sparkle below, but for Daniel the real light was beginning to emerge from within. The short film wrapped, and Daniel's performance earned quiet praise from the director, a kind older man who pulled him aside after the final take. "You've got something real, kid. Don't let the industry bury it." Those words stuck with Daniel through the holiday season, which he spent alone, avoiding family gatherings. Lorenzo invited him to a small gathering with close friends, but Daniel declined, citing work, which was only half true. The distance grew, and Lorenzo stopped pushing, eventually sending only occasional check-ins that Daniel answered with short replies. Guilt ate at him, but fear kept him silent. Then came the holiday call from home, his mother's voice trembling as she asked if the rumors were true. Daniel froze, unable to lie anymore. "Mom, yeah, they are." The silence on the other end stretched until she whispered, "We love you, son, but this changes things." The conversation ended in tears, leaving Daniel shattered on his living room floor. He reached for the phone to call Lorenzo, but stopped himself, instead walking the empty streets until dawn. The betrayal from Mike still burned, but now it paled against his own self-betrayal. When he finally texted Lorenzo, the response was immediate: "Doors open, come whenever." They met at a quiet diner the next morning, where Daniel poured out everything: the family rejection, the career stall, the nights he questioned if he deserved happiness. Lorenzo listened without interruption, then shared his own past hurts, the ex who left because coming out was too hard. "I won't walk away, Daniel, but I can't keep waiting forever either." The honesty hit hard, forcing Daniel to confront the choices he had made. They parted with a tentative hug, promising to stay in touch, but both knew the relationship was at a crossroads. Months passed, and Daniel threw himself into voiceover work and background gigs, anything to stay relevant. He started therapy recommended by a supportive casting director, the sessions peeling back layers of shame he had carried since adolescence. The therapist helped him see how societal pressure had shaped his fears, turning love into a liability. Slowly, Daniel began volunteering at an LGBTQ youth center, sharing his story anonymously at first, then more openly. The work gave him purpose, a reminder that his journey mattered beyond Hollywood. Lorenzo, meanwhile, landed a writing gig on a popular series, and their paths crossed at an industry mixer. The conversation was polite but strained until Lorenzo pulled him aside. "I'm proud of you for the center work. It suits you." The compliment warmed Daniel, but the romantic spark felt dimmed by time and hurt. A major misunderstanding arose when Daniel overheard Lorenzo laughing with a new colleague at a bar, mistaking their friendly banter for something more. Jealousy flared, and Daniel confronted him outside, accusing him of moving on too quickly. Lorenzo's face fell. "That's rich coming from the guy who pushed me away for months." The argument spilled into the street, raw emotions finally surfacing. Daniel admitted his fear of losing everything had made him push Lorenzo out. They sat on the curb talking until the bar closed, the air clearing somewhat, but the rift remained. Back home, Daniel reflected on the sacrifice he had made, pushing away the one person who truly saw him. The psychological growth was painful but real, forcing him to acknowledge that hiding had cost him more than any role ever could. Spring brought a breakthrough, a supporting role in an independent feature about family secrets. Daniel poured his real experiences into the performance, earning his first positive reviews in years. The director, a gay man himself, noticed Daniel's authenticity and offered quiet encouragement. Own your story, it makes you powerful. Inspired, Daniel started writing a short script of his own late nights, fueled by coffee and memories. Lorenzo read an early draft and gave honest feedback, their professional rapport rebuilding what romance had lost. Yet the family situation worsened when his father sent a letter disowning him until he sorted himself out. The words cut deep, but Daniel chose not to respond, instead channeling the pain into his work. He visited the youth center more often, mentoring young men facing similar struggles, their resilience mirroring his own emerging strength. As summer approached, Daniel received an invitation to a prestigious screenwriting workshop Lorenzo had recommended. He accepted, knowing it meant facing old fears in a new light. The workshop, in a coastal town, brought long days of critiques and evenings of reflection. One night, Daniel called Lorenzo, the conversation flowing easier than it had in months. "I miss us, Lo, not just the friendship." Lorenzo's reply was cautious, but hopeful. "Me too, but we need to be sure this time." The call ended with plans to meet, when Daniel returned, the first real step toward reconciliation. Meanwhile, the independent film premiered at a small festival, drawing attention from bigger names. Daniel attended alone, but felt a quiet pride watching his name in the credits. The journey was far from over, but each decision, each confrontation, was shaping him into someone stronger, more authentic. The misunderstandings, the betrayals, and the sacrifices had all led to this point, where Daniel finally began to see his worth beyond the roles he played. Lorenzo's steady presence in the background reminded him that acceptance started within, and perhaps, just perhaps, the love they shared could survive the storms ahead. The city waited for his return, but Daniel knew the real homecoming was happening inside his own heart. The festival buzz led to a surprise meeting with a major studio executive who had seen Daniel's performance. "You've got depth, kid, the kind that doesn't come from training alone," she said over coffee. The conversation opened doors Daniel thought were permanently closed. He landed a callback for a supporting role in a big-budget drama, not the lead, but a step up. Preparation consumed him, long hours memorizing lines and working with a coach on emotional layers drawn from his life. Lorenzo cheered from the sidelines, sending care packages and video messages that made Daniel smile for the first time in ages. Their relationship began to heal slowly, with honest talks about boundaries and trust. "No more pushing away," Lorenzo promised during a weekend hike in the hills. Daniel agreed, the weight of past mistakes lifting slightly. Yet family pressure resurfaced when his sister visited Los Angeles, hoping to broker peace. The dinner started civil until she mentioned their father's declining health. "He misses you, Dan, but he won't say it. This whole situation is killing him." Daniel's chest tightened, the old guilt returning. That night he argued with Lorenzo about whether to fly home and confront them. "You can't keep sacrificing your peace for people who won't meet you halfway." Lorenzo argued, his voice firm but loving. The disagreement highlighted the ongoing tension between Daniel's loyalty to family and his need for self-acceptance. In the end, he decided against the trip, choosing instead to send a letter expressing his truth without apology. The response was silence, but Daniel felt empowered by the act of standing firm. The big turning point came during filming, when a co-star, a veteran actor, pulled Daniel aside after a particularly emotional scene. "I saw myself in you 20 years ago, kid. Don't make my mistake of staying hidden until it's too late." The words resonated deeply, prompting Daniel to make a decision that would change everything. He began subtly incorporating elements of his identity into interviews, talking about personal struggles without full disclosure. The studio noticed the shift and surprisingly supported it, quietly updating his bio to reflect a more authentic image. Lorenzo celebrated the progress with a quiet dinner at home, candles flickering as they toasted to new beginnings. Their embrace that night felt like coming home, the romantic spark reigniting stronger than before. Misunderstandings still surfaced when an old tabloid photo resurfaced online, sparking fresh rumors. Daniel chose transparency, this time posting a simple statement on social media about living truthfully. The backlash was swift from conservative outlets, but support poured in from fans and colleagues alike. Mike reached out with a belated apology, which Daniel accepted, but chose not to rebuild the friendship, recognizing some betrayals left permanent scars. The psychological growth was evident in how Daniel handled the stress, now turning to Lorenzo and his therapist instead of isolation. The role wrapped, and early screenings hinted at award buzz for the ensemble cast. Daniel felt a quiet pride mixed with anticipation for what came next. Summer turned to fall, and the film premiered at a major festival where Daniel walked the red carpet with Lorenzo by his side for the first time publicly. Cameras flashed, questions flew, but Daniel smiled through it all, his hand brushing Lorenzo's in a subtle show of unity. The standing ovation at the screening brought tears to his eyes, not just for the film, but for the journey it represented. Backstage, Lorenzo pulled him into a hug, whispering, "You did it, love." The moment crystallized the happiness Daniel had fought so hard for. Yet the real test loomed, with award season approaching and family reconciliation still unresolved. Daniel's mother called unexpectedly, her voice softer than before. "Your father saw the film. He's proud, even if he can't say it yet." The words offered a glimmer of hope, healing old wounds. As winter set in, Daniel received word of his first major nomination for Best Supporting Actor at a Critics' Choice Award. The news stunned him, sending him into a whirlwind of interviews and preparations. Lorenzo stood as his rock, helping with speeches and calming nerves. Their relationship deepened through shared laughter and quiet nights, planning a future beyond the spotlight. The sacrifice of those early years now felt worthwhile, each challenge forging a bond unbreakable. Daniel reflected often on the path that began with a single-cut role, how it forced him to confront truths he had buried. The big turning point of choosing authenticity had shifted his fate, opening doors he never imagined. With Lorenzo's hand in his, Daniel faced the future, ready for whatever came next, knowing that love and acceptance were no longer distant dreams, but realities he had earned. The city lights twinkled brighter, that season reflecting the light growing within him. Award season kicked off with a rush of events, and Daniel found himself in rooms filled with legends who now knew his name. The supporting actor nomination brought invitations to galas where he spoke openly about representation, surprising even himself with the ease of his words. Lorenzo attended every event, their matching tuxedos drawing smiles and quiet applause from allies in the crowd. One evening at a pre-Oscar party, a director approached Daniel, offering the lead in his next project, a story about redemption and identity. "I want someone who lived it," the director said, shaking his hand firmly. Daniel accepted on the spot, the offer feeling like validation after years of doubt. Rehearsals began immediately, long days that tested his limits, but also brought joy as he shaped the character with personal truth. Family reconciliation progressed slowly, his mother visiting for the awards shows her presence a quiet bridge. She met Lorenzo over dinner, the conversation awkward at first, but warming as stories were shared. "You make him happy," she told Lorenzo privately, the words carrying years of unspoken acceptance. Daniel's father stayed home, but sent a card with a simple message, "Proud of the man you've become." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress enough to ease the ache Daniel had carried. The psychological healing continued in therapy sessions where he processed the betrayal, the misunderstandings, and the sacrifices that had defined his path. Each session reinforced his growth, turning pain into purpose. The climax built as Oscar nominations were announced, Daniel's name appearing in the Best Actor category for the new film, his first lead role in years. The news exploded across headlines, the story of the actor who lost everything and found it again, capturing public imagination. Lorenzo organized a small celebration with close friends, the evening filled with laughter and toasts to resilience. Yet nerves crept in as the ceremony approached, Daniel rehearsing his acceptance speech in the mirror, questioning if he deserved the recognition. Lorenzo reassured him, "You've earned every bit of this and more." Their love shone brighter in those moments, the romantic happiness Daniel once thought impossible, now his daily reality. On the night of the Oscars, the red carpet buzzed with energy, Daniel and Lorenzo walking hand in hand, cameras flashing around them. Inside the theater, the tension mounted as categories were called. When Best Actor was announced, the presenter opened the envelope and read his name. The room erupted. Daniel rose in disbelief, tears streaming as he embraced Lorenzo tightly before heading to the stage. The speech poured out naturally, thanking his team, his family, and especially Lorenzo for showing me that love isn't something to hide, but to celebrate." The audience stood the applause thunderous, marking not just a career peak, but a personal triumph. Backstage, the emotions overwhelmed him, the weight of the journey lifting in waves of relief and joy. Lorenzo waited in the wings, pulling him into a kiss that spoke of years of patience and unwavering support. "We did it together," he whispered, the words sealing their bond. The after-parties blurred into celebrations, but Daniel slipped away early with Lorenzo to their hotel balcony overlooking the city. They talked until dawn, reflecting on the path from that devastating phone call to this moment of glory. The misunderstandings had been resolved, the betrayals overcome, and the sacrifices rewarded with a love that endured. Daniel felt truly seen, accepted, and whole for the first time. The award sat on the table, a symbol of more than success, a testament to the power of truth. As dawn broke, they watched the sun rise together, hands intertwined, the future stretching bright and open before them. The journey had tested every part of him, but in the end it had led exactly where he needed to be. The morning after the Oscars, Daniel woke to a flood of messages and interview requests, but he silenced his phone, choosing instead to linger in bed with Lorenzo. The award gleamed on the nightstand, a tangible reminder of how far they had come. They spent the day quietly cooking brunch and walking along the beach, the simple moments feeling more precious than any spotlight. Lorenzo teased him gently about the speech. "You made me cry in front of millions, you know." Daniel laughed, pulling him close. Every word was true. Their relationship had never felt stronger, forged in fire and now resting in peace. News outlets hailed the win as a landmark for representation, stories of Daniel's journey circulating widely, inspiring countless others. He used the platform to advocate for LGBTQ youth, continuing his work at the center now with greater resources. Months later, the new film wrapped, and Daniel took a well-deserved break, traveling with Lorenzo to Italy, where they explored ancient streets and shared gelato under sunny skies. The trip solidified their commitment, Lorenzo proposing quietly one evening on a hillside overlooking vineyards. Daniel said yes, without hesitation, tears of joy mixing with the sunset. Back home, they planned a small wedding surrounded by chosen family and reconciled parents. His father attended the ceremony, his handshake firm and eyes misty, a silent acknowledgement of growth on both sides. The celebration was intimate, filled with laughter and stories that wove their lives together. Daniel reflected often on the early days, the roll cut that felt like the end, but proved to be the beginning of everything real. As years passed, Daniel balanced acting with producing stories that mattered, authentic tales of love and identity. Lorenzo's screenplays gained acclaim, their creative partnership mirroring their personal one. The psychological scars had faded, replaced by a quiet strength that guided every decision. Friends from the old days reconnected, some offering apologies, others simply celebrating the success. The betrayals taught valuable lessons about trust, while the sacrifices highlighted the depth of their bond. Daniel often visited the youth center, sharing his full story, now the young men looking at him with hope in their eyes. Life settled into a rhythm of work, love, and advocacy, each day affirming the choices that had led him here. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Lorenzo asked, "Would you change anything about the path we took?" Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled. "Not a single step. It brought me to you." The answer came from a place of hard-won peace, the journey complete, yet always evolving. Hollywood continued its cycles, but Daniel had found his place within it, unapologetically himself. The award remained a cherished memory, but the true victory lived in the everyday moments of acceptance and love. As the stars appeared overhead, Daniel felt grateful for every challenge that had shaped him into the man he was proud to be. True love always conquers societal expectations. True or false?